Tasha Coleman stood in a sweltering Texas courtroom, bruises blooming across her dark skin, staring down a judge who'd just dismissed her case against two white cops who'd pummeled her during a traffic stop. The gavel cracked. The crowd buzzed. Then she flashed a sly smirk, whispering, "This ain't over." Tucked in her pocket, a tiny recorder held Judge Tate's off-record racist tirade. That half-win hid a tsunami of chaos ready to rip her world apart. What's on that tape, and how will it unleash hell? Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice against corruption, hit like and subscribe for more stories that expose the truth. Tasha Coleman gripped the steering wheel of her weathered blue coupe, the hum of its engine a steady pulse against the clamor of Houston's evening sprawl. She'd just clocked out from a grueling double shift at St. Luke's Hospital, her nurses, scrubs still clinging to her sweat-damp skin, the faint scent of antiseptic lingering in her braids. 32 years old, sharp as a scalpel, she navigated the potholed streets of the Third Ward with practiced ease, her brown eyes flicking to the rear-view mirror every few seconds out of habit. The sky bruised purple above the city's jagged skyline, streetlights flickering to life as she turned onto a quiet stretch of old Spanish trail. Her stomach growled, dreaming of the leftover gumbo waiting at home, a rare night off ahead. Then twin beams of red and blue erupted behind her, slicing through the dusk like a predator's glare. She frowned, glancing at the speedometer. 35 miles per hour, dead on the limit. No weaving, no sudden turns. Her tail lights glowed, steady when she'd checked them at the hospital lot, a ritual born from years of knowing a busted bulb could spell trouble for a black woman driving alone. Registration up to date, insurance paid, nothing to flag. Yet the police cruiser's lights pulsed insistently, a silent command she couldn't ignore. That familiar knot twisted in her gut, the one every black driver in America knew too well, a mix of irritation and dread she'd learned to swallow since her first stop at 16. She flicked on her blinker, easing the coupe to the cracked shoulder of the road, tires crunching gravel as she killed the engine. Two officers stepped out of the cruiser, their silhouettes looming against the flashing backdrop. Tasha squinted through the side mirror, catching the glint of badges and the swagger in their strides. Officer Dale Pruitt led the charge, a wiry man with a buzz cut and a jawline carved from arrogance, his pale skin catching the cruiser's glow. Behind him lumbered Vernon Holt, thicker, broader, his buzzed blonde hair glinting like straw, his meaty hands already flexing near his belt. Both white, both radiating a menace that didn't need words. She rolled down her window, the humid Texas, air rushing in, thick with the tang of asphalt and distant oil refineries. "Evening, officers," Tasha said, her voice a careful balance of calm and steel, honed from years of de-escalating emergencies in the ER. "What's the issue?" Pruitt leaned in, his flashlight stabbing her eyes with a harsh beam, forcing her to blink against the glare. "Taillights out," he snapped, his tone clipped and cold, like he'd already decided her guilt. "Step out of the vehicle." Tasha's brow creased. "My taillights were fine when I left work. Can you check again?" She kept her hands visible on the wheel, fingers steady, despite the quickening thud of her pulse. Pruitt's lips twitched. Into a sneer, his grey eyes narrowing as if her question was an insult. Holt circled to the passenger side, peering through the window, his bulk casting a shadow across the empty seat. "Out! Now!" Pruitt barked, stepping back and resting a hand on his holstered pistol. His voice carried a jagged edge, a dare she knew better than to test. Tasha exhaled slow, her mind racing through the playbook she'd built over a lifetime. Stay composed, don't argue, survive the encounter. She'd prepped for moments like this, not as a nurse, but as a black woman who'd seen too many headlines end in blood. What these cops didn't know, couldn't know, was that they'd just stepped into a trap of their own making, one that would unravel their careers and drag her into a war she hadn't signed up for. She popped the door handle, easing out onto the pavement, her sneakers scuffing the dirt. The night air pressed against her, heavy and still, the distant hum of traffic a faint lifeline. A handful of onlookers had gathered across the street, shadowy figures by a gas station, their phones glinting as they filmed. Tasha stood straight, 5'6", her frame lean but solid from hauling patients and dodging chaos. "I'm complying," she said, hands loose at her sides, palms open. "Just tell me what you need." Pruitt didn't answer. His sneer widened, a predator sizing up a meal. "You're trouble, aren't you?" he muttered, low enough that the bystanders wouldn't catch it, but loud enough to prickle her skin. Before she could respond, he lunged, slamming her chest first, against the coupe's hood. The metal seared hot from the day's sun, scorching through her scrubs as her cheek smashed into it, a jolt of pain sparking behind her eyes. She gasped, breath knocked out, but bit down on the yelp clawing up her throat. "Thought you had something in there," Pruitt growled, yanking her arms back with a twist that made her shoulder scream. Cold steel cuffs snapped around her wrists, biting into her flesh. Holt loomed closer, his breath sour with coffee and contempt, muttering, "Always the same with you people." The words landed like a slap, raw and deliberate, a racial venom she'd heard whispered in hospital halls, but never so bold, so close. Tasha's mind spun, cataloguing every move, every word. She'd done nothing wrong, followed every rule, yet here she was, pinned like a criminal while a half-dozen strangers watched in silence. Her training kicked in, the part that stitched wounds under pressure, that kept her cool when patients flatlined. "I didn't reach for anything," she said, voice steady despite the ache blooming across her ribs. "Check the car. You'll—" "See," Holt snorted, stepping back to kick the coupe's tire, as if testing her defiance. Pruitt tightened the cuffs until she winced, his knuckles brushing her spine with a sickening intent. "Shut it," he hissed, then shoved her toward the cruiser. Her sneakers skidded, catching a jagged rock that sliced her ankle, a thin trickle of blood staining her sock. The onlookers shifted, a murmur rippling through them, but no one moved closer. The gas station's neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on the scene, turning it into a stage where Tasha was both actor and captive. They hauled her to the cruiser's back door, Pruitt's grip a vice on her elbow, Holt's boots thudding behind. "Resisting arrest," Pruitt announced, loud enough for the phones to catch, a lie so blatant it burned. Tasha's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding, as she fought the urge to call it out. She knew the script, argue, and it's her word against theirs, a losing game with no referee. The door swung open, and they shoved her inside, her cuffed hands twisting awkwardly as she landed on the cracked vinyl seat. The door slammed, the sound a gunshot in the quiet, locking her in a cage of steel and glass. Through the mesh partition, she saw Pruitt lean into Holt, their laughter sharp and guttural, a private joke at her expense. Holt spat into the dirt, wiping his mouth with a meaty fist, while Pruitt adjusted his belt, his flashlight swinging like a pendulum. Tasha's chest heaved, each breath a battle against the panic clawing up her spine. She wasn't speeding, wasn't drunk, wasn't anything but a black woman in the wrong place, wrong time, wrong skin. The cruiser's engine roared to life, jolting her against the seat as they peeled out, gravel spraying like shrapnel. Her eyes darted to the coupe, abandoned on the shoulder, its headlights dimming as the battery bled out. She memorized their faces, their names etched on their badges, Pruitt and Holt. This wasn't a random stop, not a fluke of bad luck. Their stares had been too cold, too calculated, like hunters who'd spotted their mark long before the lights flashed. She'd seen that look in the ER, in the eyes of men who thrived on power, who broke bodies and called it duty. The city blurred past the window, a smear of neon and concrete as the cruiser barreled toward the precinct. Tasha's mind raced, piecing it together. They'd targeted her, but why? She had no record, no enemies, just a job saving lives and a life kept quiet. The cuffs dug deeper, her wrists throbbing, but she forced her breathing steady, counting. Inhales like a lifeline. She didn't know it yet, but this moment was the spark, the first domino in a chain that would drag her through fire, blood, and betrayal. Pruitt twisted in the driver's seat, catching her eye in the rear view. "Should have stayed in your lane," he said, his voice a blade wrapped in silk. Holt chuckled, cracking his knuckles against the dash, the sound a promise of worse to come. Tasha held Pruitt's gaze, unblinking, her silence a weapon they couldn't touch. She wasn't just a nurse anymore, not just a woman caught in their net. She was a target, and whatever game they were playing, she'd just been forced to join. The precinct loomed ahead, a squat fortress of brick and lies, and as the cruiser slowed, Tasha knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. Tasha Coleman sat in the back of the police cruiser, wrists raw from the cuffs, her breath fogging the glass as officers Pruitt and Holt hauled her into the belly of Houston's 3rd Precinct. The station reeked of stale coffee and bleach, a fluorescent-lit maze of chipped desks and muttering cops who barely glanced her way. She kept her chin up, eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling, refusing to let the fear gnawing her gut show. They'd booked her fast, fingerprints smudged onto a scanner, mugshot snapped under a blinding flash, the charges spat out like venom, resisting arrest. A lie so bold it stung, but Tasha knew better than to argue in a den of wolves. She'd seen patients lie through broken teeth in the ER. This was just a different breed of desperation. They tossed her into a holding cell, a 6x8 box of concrete and rust, the door clanging shut with a finality that echoed in her bones. She paced, sneakers squeaking on the grimy floor. Her mind a whirlwind of questions. Why her? What had she done to earn this? The tail-light excuse was flimsy, a paper-thin cover for something uglier. She replayed the stop. Pruitt's sneer, Holt's meaty fists, the way they'd moved like they'd rehearsed it. This wasn't random. It was a hit. But on what? She had no enemies, no debts, just a paycheck-to-paycheck life stitching people back together. The cell's single bulb buzzed overhead, casting jittery shadows as she sank onto the metal bench, her scrubs stiff with dried sweat. Hours bled into each other, the precinct's hum a distant drone, until a rookie cop, barely 20, shuffled in with a clipboard. "Bail's posted," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. "You're out." Tasha's brow arched, surprise flickering through her exhaustion. She hadn't called anyone. Her phone was still in the coupe, probably impounded by now. She followed him out, the cuffs gone, but their bite lingering in purple welts around her wrists. In the lobby stood Nurse Carla, her graying braids pulled tight, her hospital badge still clipped to her jacket. Tasha's shift supervisor, a woman who'd seen her through late-night traumas and cafeteria breakdowns, had come through without a word. "Girl, you okay?" Carla asked, her voice a low growl of worry, as she pulled Tasha into a quick, fierce hug. "Saw your name on the arrest log, called in some favors." Tasha nodded, throat tight, grateful for the lifeline. Carla wasn't alone. 2 other co-workers, Jamal and Priya, hovered nearby, their faces etched with anger. They'd scraped together the bail, $500 cash, and brought a shaky cell phone video from the gas station bystander. It wasn't much, just grainy footage of Pruitt slamming her against the hood, Holt looming like a vulture, but it was enough to poke holes in the cop's story. The precinct clerk grumbled, but the judge on call, roused from sleep, had signed off on her release. Tasha stepped into the muggy night, the precinct's sodium lights buzzing behind her, and let out a shaky laugh. "Thought I was done for," she said, rubbing her wrists as Jamal handed her a spare hoodie. The video had gone to a local activist group, already buzzing online with hashtags like "Injustice for Tasha." She felt the weight lift, a fragile hope blooming. Maybe this was it, a quick nightmare she could shake off. She climbed into Carla's pickup, the engine rumbling as they peeled away, the city's neon sprawl swallowing the precinct's glare. "Thanks, y'all," she muttered, sinking into the seat, her body screaming for rest. The drive home was quiet, the radio crackling with a late-night jazz station, Carla's knuckles white on the wheel. Tasha's apartment loomed ahead, a squat brick building on the edge of the 3rd Ward, its flickering porch light a beacon. She trudged up the stairs, key jiggling in the lock, and pushed the door open, expecting the familiar creak of her hardwood floors. Instead, a wall of heat slammed into her, the acrid sting of smoke clawing her lungs. She froze, eyes widening as flames danced across her living room, orange tongues licking the couch, the curtains, the cheap bookshelf she'd built. Herself! Her scream lodged in her throat as she stumbled back, the heat searing her face. "Fire!" she yelled, voice cracking, but the hallway was empty, neighbors either asleep or gone. She fumbled for her borrowed hoodie, wrapping it around her hand to yank the extinguisher from the wall. The canister hissed, white foam spraying. wild as she fought the blaze, her arms trembling from exhaustion. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, but too slow, too late. The fire died under her frantic assault, leaving a charred skeleton of her home, smoke curling like ghosts around the wreckage. She staggered outside, coughing, her scrubs black with soot, and saw it. Scrawled across the singed doorframe in dripping red paint, "Go back." The words hit like a fist, a racial gut punch that stole her breath. This wasn't an accident, not a faulty wire or a forgotten candle. This was a message, a torch lit by hate. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself on the railing, fury boiling up through the shock. She'd beaten their jail cell, walked free, and they'd answered with fire. Headlights cut through the haze, an unmarked sedan idling across the street. Tasha squinted, her heart lurching as she spotted two figures inside. Pruitt's buzz-cut silhouette, Holt's broad shoulders. They didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, their faces shadowed, but their smirks glinting in the flicker of a passing fire truck. The truck screeched up, firefighters spilling out, shouting orders as hoses unfurled, but Tasha's eyes stayed locked on that car. Pruitt raised a hand, a mock salute, then peeled away into the night, tires squealing on wet asphalt. She sank to the curb, the damp concrete soaking her scrubs, her hands trembling as she clutched the extinguisher like a lifeline. The bystander video, the bail, the taste of freedom, it had all been a tease, a setup for this gutting blow. Her apartment, her sanctuary, reduced to ash and hate. The firefighters milled around, their voices a dull roar, one muttering about accelerant and arson. Tasha's jaw tightened, teeth grinding as she pieced it together. Pruitt and Holt weren't just dirty cops, they were hunters, and she was their mark. Her relief from hours ago curdled into something darker, a dread that sank into her marrow. She'd thought she'd dodged their bullet, slipped their grip, but this was their real play: burn her out, break her down, send her running. The crowd grew, neighbors in robes and slippers whispering, phones out, filming the wreckage. Tasha stood, legs shaky but firm, wiping soot from her face with a sleeve. She wasn't running, not yet. This was war now, and she'd fight with whatever she had left. But as the fire's embers glowed, a question gnawed at her. How far would they go? She'd survived their cuffs, their lies, but this was a new beast, raw, personal, unhinged. Pruitt and Holt had lit the match, and the flames weren't just eating her home. They were torching the life she'd built piece by piece. She didn't know it then, but this was only the first strike, a spark in a storm that would drag her through blood and betrayal, test every ounce of her grit, and force her to become something she'd never imagined, a weapon forged in their fire. What do you think about Tasha's fight so far? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you're raging at these cops' cowardice, or a number 2 if you think Tasha should have run while she could. Smash that like button if you're rooting for her to turn the tables, and hit subscribe to catch every twist as she battles this corrupt mess. Can she outsmart Pruitt and Holt, or will their next move bury her for good? Stick around to find out what hits her next. Tasha Coleman stood amid the smoldering ruins of her apartment, the dawn sun painting the third ward in streaks of gold and ash. Her scrubs hung off her, blackened and torn, the extinguisher still clutched in her trembling hands as firefighters poked through the wreckage. The red paint on her doorframe, "Go back," glared like an open wound, a racist scar she couldn't unsee. Her neighbors whispered behind cupped hands, their pity a weight she shrugged off as she limped to Carla's pickup. She'd lost everything: photos, clothes, the little cedar box where she kept her late mom's letters. But the fire hadn't touched her resolve. Pruitt and Holt had torched her home, saluted her from their sedan, and she'd be damned if they got the last word. Carla drove her to a cheap motel off I-45, the kind with peeling paint and a buzzing vacancy sign. Tasha crashed on the lumpy bed, her body a map of aches, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind churned, replaying the stop, the cuffs, the flames. She needed a fighter, someone to claw through the mess Pruitt and Holt had made of her life. By noon, Carla returned with a name: Jade Marshall, a black attorney known for chewing up crooked cops and spitting them out in court. "She's the real deal," Carla said, tossing Tasha a burner phone. "Call her now." Jade met Tasha at a diner 2 miles from the motel, a cramped joint with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like tar. 38, wiry, with a buzz cut and eyes that could cut glass, Jade carried herself like she'd been born for battle. Her suit was crisp, a stark contrast to Tasha's borrowed sweats, but her handshake was warm, firm. "Heard about your place," Jade said, sliding into the booth, her voice low and steady. "Cops did it, huh?" Tasha nodded, recounting the "Stop, the arrest, the fire." Her words clipped but sharp, a nurse charting a patient's decline. Jade listened, jotting notes on a legal pad, her pen scratching like a blade honing itself. "This stinks of systemic rot," Jade said, tapping the pad. "Pruitt and Holt aren't lone wolves. They've got a pack behind them. I'll take your case, no charge. We're hitting back hard." Tasha's chest loosened, a flicker of trust sparking. Jade wasn't just a lawyer, she was a bulldog with a cause, the kind who'd faced down racists in suits and badges and lived to tell it. They dug in, Jade pulling strings to access Pruitt and Holt's personnel files through a clerk she knew at the precinct. By dusk, they had a stack of PDFs on Jade's laptop, buried complaints from black drivers stretching back 5 years, beatings, planted drugs, slurs shrugged off by internal affairs. "Jackpot," Jade muttered, scrolling through a report of Pruitt smashing a teen's face into a curb, the kid's mom silenced with a payout. Holt had his own trail, a string of resisting arrests that ended in broken bones and dismissed charges. Tasha's stomach churned, the pattern clear as blood on a chart. They targeted her people, hunted them, and the system let it slide. Jade's grin was feral. "This is our ammo, we leak it, force their hand." Tasha hesitated, the fire's heat still prickling her skin, but nodded. "Do it. Let's see them squirm." Jade sent the files to a local blog, Houston Uncovered, run by a scrappy journalist named Malik, who lived for exposing dirt. By midnight, the post went live. "Rogue cops terrorize black Houstonians. See the proof." Screenshots of the complaints splashed across the screen, Pruitt's smirking ID photo beside Holt's cold stare. Tasha watched from the motel's dial-up Wi-Fi, the page views ticking up like a heartbeat. Morning brought chaos. The story hit Twitter, hashtags exploding, one cops caught trending by breakfast. Protesters clogged downtown, megaphones blaring outside the precinct. Their voices a roar Tasha felt in her chest, even from the motel's thin walls. She cracked a smile, the first in days, sitting cross-legged on the bed as Jade called with updates. "They're rattled," Jade said, her tone electric. "Chief's dodging cameras and the mayor's mumbling about an investigation. We've got momentum." Tasha exhaled, the tide shifting under her feet. She pictured Pruitt and Holt sweating, their badges tarnished, maybe even stripped. The poor. Dinah's tar coffee suddenly tasted like victory, bitter but bold. She leaned back, hope creeping in, a fragile thing she hadn't dared touch since the cuffs clicked shut. Then, just past 2 in the afternoon, glass shattered across the diner's parking lot, where Jade had parked her beat-up Corolla for their lunch meet. Tasha bolted upright from the booth, Jade cursing as they raced outside. A brick lay in the gravel, jagged and smeared with mud, a crumpled note taped to it. Jade snatched it up, unfolding it with steady hands. "Drop it or die," it read, the letters scrawled in thick black marker, a threat so blunt it sucked the air from Tasha's lungs. She scanned the lot, her pulse hammering, but the street was empty, just the hum of traffic and the distant wail of a siren. Jade crumpled the note, her jaw tight. "They're scared," she said, but her eyes flicked to the shadows, wary. Tasha nodded, forcing her breath even, clinging to that spark of hope. The leak had hit them where it hurt. This was proof. She'd started to turn back to the diner, when a low rumble growled from the lot's edge. Her coupe, towed here by Carla that morning, sat under a flickering streetlight. Before she could blink, a deafening boom split the air, the car erupting in a fireball that flung her backward onto the asphalt. Heat blasted her face, shards of metal raining down as the explosion's roar swallowed her scream. She scrambled up, ears ringing, her borrowed sweat singed at the edges. Jade grabbed her arm, yanking her behind a dumpster as flames devoured the coupe, black smoke billowing into the sky. Tires screeched nearby, a pickup peeling out, but Tasha couldn't see faces, just the glint of a badge on a sleeve through the haze. Pruitt and Holt or their lackeys had struck again, turning her last lifeline to ash. Her knees shook, but she locked them, staring at the inferno. The blog post, the protests, the hope. It had all been a match to their fuse. Sirens howled closer, red lights flashing through the smoke, but Tasha's world narrowed to the fire's crackle and Jade's ragged breathing beside her. "They're not stopping," Jade whispered, her voice a blade dulled by shock. Tasha's fists clenched, nails biting her palms. She'd thought the leak would cage them, force them to heal, but they'd answered with a bomb, a death sentence in broad daylight. The motel wasn't safe anymore. Nowhere was. She'd poked the beast, and it wasn't just Pruitt and Holt. It was the whole rotten machine behind them, flexing its claws. Her hope curdled into rage, hot and jagged, as firefighters swarmed the lot, hoses blasting the blaze. She'd lost her home, now her car, and they'd nearly taken her life with it. Jade gripped her shoulder, eyes blazing. "We're not done. This is evidence. They're cracking." Tasha nodded, tasting blood where she'd bitten her lip. But doubt gnawed deeper. Evidence for what? A system that let them burn her world and walk away laughing? She watched the flames die, the coup's skeleton a twisted husk under the spray. Pruitt and Holt weren't backing down. They were escalating, playing a game where she was the pawn and the board kept shifting. Her scrubs clung to her, soaked with sweat and grime, but she stood taller, spine steel despite the tremor in her hands. They'd tried to bury her in fire. Twice now, and she was still breathing. Whatever came next, she'd face it head-on because running wasn't an option anymore. But as the smoke cleared, a chill settled in. How much worse could they get? Tasha Coleman crouched behind the dumpster, the acrid stench of burning rubber stinging her nose as the firefighters doused her exploded coupe. Jade Marshall knelt beside her, phone pressed to her ear, barking at a contact to get them a safe ride out of the diner's lot. The car bomb's echo still rattled Tasha's skull, her borrowed sweat singed at the hems, her skin prickling from the heat she'd barely escaped. She'd lost her apartment to flames, now her car to a blast, and Pruitt and Holt's shadows loomed larger with every strike. Jade's voice cut through the haze, sharp and urgent. "We're taking this to court, now. They've overplayed their hand." By morning, Jade had Tasha holed up in a friend's duplex on Houston's east side, a squat stucco box with barred windows and a deadbolt that clicked like a gunshot. Tasha showered off the soot, swapping her ruined clothes for a borrowed blouse and jeans, the fabric stiff against her bruised skin. Jade worked fast, filing an emergency motion with the viral blog post and the brick threat as ammo, demanding a hearing against Pruitt and Holt. "We've got the public's eyes," Jade said, pacing the duplex's cramped kitchen, her laptop glowing with news alerts. "They can't bury this quiet." The hearing hit 3 days later, a sweltering Tuesday in a Harris County courtroom packed with reporters, activists, and a scattering of cops in civvies who glared daggers at Tasha from the back row. She walked in beside Jade, head high despite the ache in her ribs, her braids pulled tight into a bun that felt like armor. The judge, Clarence Tate, perched behind the bench, a paunchy white man with a drawl thick as molasses and eyes that flicked over Tasha like she was a stain on his docket. Jade had warned her. Tate was old school, tied to the precinct's brass, but the media storm made him twitchy. He couldn't dodge this one. Jade laid it out, voice ringing clear across the room, every word a jab. She played the bystander video. From the gas station, grainy but damning, Pruitt's hands slamming Tasha into the coupe's hood, Holt's bulk hovering as she stayed still. "This is no resisting arrest," Jade snapped, pointing at the screen. "This is brutality, plain and simple." She stacked the leaked complaints next, a tower of paper detailing Pruitt and Holt's history, black drivers roughed up, charges dropped, witnesses paid off. The gallery murmured, phones buzzing as tweets flew. Tasha watched Tate's jowls tighten, his gavel twitching in his hand. Then it was her turn. She took the stand, palms damp but steady, her nurse's precision guiding her words. "I was driving home from a 16-hour shift," she said, locking eyes with the jury. A mix of faces she hoped might listen. "They pulled me over. Said my taillight was out. It wasn't. I complied, stepped out, and Officer Pruitt threw me against my car. Officer Holt cuffed me while I stood there, doing nothing but breathing." She paused, voice dipping low. 3 days later, they burned my apartment down. Yesterday, they blew up my car. I've got the scars to prove it. She rolled up her sleeve, showing the welts from the cuffs, the burns from the fire, her dark skin a canvas of their hate. The room stirred a ripple of gasps and whispers. Jade handed up photos of the arson, the go-back scroll, the coup's charred husk. "This is retaliation," Jade said, turning to Tate. "They're terrorizing my client because she dared to exist." Pruitt and Holt sat at the defense table, flanked by a slick precinct lawyer who smirked like he'd already won. They didn't testify, their silence a wall, but Tasha caught Pruitt's grey eyes glinting, a promise of more to come. She held his stare unblinking, her spine a rod of steel. Tate shifted in his seat, sweat beading on his brow as cameras rolled from the gallery. The pressure was a vice. He couldn't ignore the evidence, not with the world watching. He cleared his throat, voice gravelly. "Insufficient evidence to sustain these charges against Miss Coleman," he drawled, gavel hovering. "Case dismissed, for now." The crack of wood on wood split the air, and the room erupted, cheers clashing with groans. Tasha exhaled, a shaky breath she hadn't known she was holding, her lips twitching into a half-smile. Jade clapped her shoulder, whispering, "First blood's ours." She walked out into the courthouse steps, the humid air a slap after the AC's chill, protesters chanting her name beyond the barricades. "Tasha! Tasha!" they roared, fists pumping, signs jabbing the sky. She felt it, a fleeting rush of triumph, like she'd punched through their lies and landed a hit. Jade grinned beside her, phone buzzing with reporters begging for quotes. "They're on the ropes," Jade said, steering her to a borrowed sedan. "We keep pushing." Tasha nodded, the weight lifting, if only for a moment. Maybe justice wasn't a myth, maybe she could win this. That night, she crashed at the duplex, the TV flickering with news of the dismissal, pundits dissecting Tate's ruling. She sank into the couch, exhaustion pulling at her bones, the borrowed jeans stiff against her thighs. She'd beaten their charges, turned their game back on them. Sleep tugged her under, a rare peace settling in. Then, just past midnight, the window shattered, glass spraying across the floor like jagged rain. Tasha jolted awake, heart slamming as 3 figures burst through, ski masks dark against the moonlight, boots thudding on the hardwood. She rolled off the couch, scrambling for the kitchen, but a gloved hand snagged her ankle, yanking her down. Pain flared as her chin hit the floor, blood coppery on her tongue. Pruitt's voice rasped through the mask, low and venomous. "Thought you'd won, huh?" A fist crashed into her side, ribs cracking under the blow, her gasp swallowed by Holt's meaty palm clamping her mouth. They dragged her outside, the duplex's quiet street a blur, and flung her into an alley 2 blocks down. The stink of garbage and piss thick in the air. Kicks rained down, boots slamming her stomach, her back, her legs buckling as she curled tight. Holt's growl cut through the haze. "Next time, you're ash." They loomed over her, shadows against the alley's brick, then bolted as a distant car horn blared. Tasha lay there, blood pooling under her cheek, the pavement cold and gritty against her skin. Her victory was a lie, a hollow shell they'd let her hold just long enough to savor before smashing it. She coughed, a wet rattle in her chest, and pushed up, every inch a fight against the pain screaming through her. Streetlights buzzed overhead, casting her shadow long and broken as she staggered to her feet. The dismissal, the cheers, the hope, it had all been a tease, a setup for this savage encore. Pruitt and Holt weren't rattled, they were enraged, their fists proving the courtroom meant nothing. She wiped blood from her lip, tasting iron, her mind racing despite the fog. They'd beaten her bloody, dumped her like trash, but she was alive, barely. She limped back to the duplex, glass crunching under her sneakers, the night swallowing her gasps. Jade found her an hour later, pounding on the door after a frantic call, her face paling at the sight of Tasha's swollen eye, the bruises blooming across her arms. "Jesus!" Jade whispered, guiding her to the couch, hands trembling as she grabbed a first aid kit. "This is war now." Tasha nodded, wincing as gauze pressed her split lip, her voice a rasp. "They think I'll break. They're wrong." But as Jade patched her up, a chill sank in. Victory had been a mirage, and the real fight was only starting. What's your take on this courtroom twist? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think Tasha's win was worth the price, or number 2, if you'd have told her to lay low after the fire. Hit that like button if you're stunned by these cops' nerve, and smash subscribe to see how Tasha fights back from this brutal beatdown. Will she find a weapon to turn the tide, or is this alley just the start of her downfall? Stay tuned to find out what she pulls out next. Tasha Coleman stumbled through the duplex's splintered doorway, blood dripping from her split lip, her borrowed jeans ripped at the knee where Pruitt's boot had landed. The alley beating clung to her like a second skin, bruises pulsing across, her ribs, her swollen eye throbbing with every heartbeat. She sank onto the couch, the springs groaning under her weight, her breath a shallow rasp as pain lanced through her cracked ribs. Jade Marshall hovered nearby, hands shaking as she pressed an ice pack to Tasha's jaw, her lawyer's composure fraying at the edges. "They jumped you," Jade hissed, voice tight with fury. "Right after the dismissal. This isn't coincidence." Tasha nodded, wincing as the cold bit her skin, her mind a storm of rage and clarity. Pruitt and Holt hadn't just beaten her, they'd declared war, their fists a message that the courtroom win meant nothing. She'd thought the gavel's crack had clipped their wings, but they'd soared back with claws out, proving the system was their playground. Her fingers brushed her pocket, the tiny recorder from the hearing still there, a hard lump against her thigh. She'd slipped it in before testifying, a gut instinct from years of charting lies in the ER, and now it was her lifeline. "Jade," she rasped, voice gravelly but firm, "get me water, then listen." Jade fetched a glass, her steps quick, across the duplex's warped floorboards, the faucet sputtering as she filled it. Tasha gulped it down, the chill soothing her raw throat, then pulled the recorder out, its black plastic scratched but intact. "Tate said something after the hearing," she said, her good eye locking on Jade's. "Off the record when the mics were down. I caught it." Jade's brow arched, curiosity cutting through her worry as she sank beside Tasha, the couch. Dipping under their weight, Tasha pressed play, the device's tinny speaker crackling to life. The audio hissed, courtroom echoes fading into silence, then Judge Clarence Tate's voice slithered out, low and venomous. "Keep that black trash in line, boys," he drawled, a chuckle rumbling beneath the words. "She's stirring the pot and I don't like the smell." A muffled grunt followed, Pruitt's maybe, then Holt's gruff, "We've got her, boss." The recording cut off, a 30-second bomb that detonated the room's stillness. Jade's jaw dropped, her legal pad slipping to the floor, pages fanning out like spilled secrets. "Holy hell," she breathed, eyes wide. "He's in on it." "The judge is their damn puppet master." Tasha's lips twitched, a grim half-smile despite the ache in her face. More than that, he's their shield. She rewound the tape, playing it again, Tate's words sinking deeper each time, a racist pact laid bare. This wasn't just Pruitt and Holt flexing muscle. It was a conspiracy, a judicial hand greasing their wheels. Jade snatched the recorder, turning it over like it was gold, her mind already racing. "This is dynamite, Tasha. We go public. It's not just the cops, it's the whole rotten bench. Tate's done." They plotted fast, Jade's fingers flying over her laptop as she drafted an email to Malik at Houston Uncovered. "We leak. This tonight," she said, voice electric. "Every station, every blog, every protester gets it. They can't bury us if the world's watching." Tasha nodded, adrenaline dulling her pain, a fire igniting in her gut. She'd tasted triumph in court, only to have it ripped away in that alley. But this tape was a blade she could wield. She pictured Tate squirming, Pruitt and Holt scrambling, their smug faces crumbling under the weight of their own words. "Do it," she said, leaning back, the ice pack dripping onto her lap. "Let's burn them down." Jade hit send, the email pinging into the ether, and they waited, the duplex's silence a taut wire. Tasha's mind churned, replaying the beating, the fire, the bomb, each blow a step in their dance, and now she'd tripped them up. She closed her eyes, exhaustion tugging, but hope flickered, sharp and bright. This could end it, snap their leash, drag them into the light. She drifted, the recorder's weight a comfort in her hand, until a sharp crack jolted her awake, her good eye snapping open. A gunshot split the night, the bullet tearing through the duplex's front window, glass exploding inward as Tasha dove her to the floor. Pain flared through her ribs. A scream trapped in her throat as she rolled behind the couch, Jade flattening beside her. The slug grazed her shoulder, a hot streak of blood soaking her blouse, the sting blurring her vision. Footsteps pounded outside, heavy and deliberate. Then a truck's engine roared, tires screeching as it peeled away. Tasha peeked over the couch's edge, her heart hammering, spotting the precinct's logo on the fleeing vehicle's tailgate through the shattered pane. Jade cursed, crawling to her bag, yanking out her phone to dial 911. "Sniper," she snapped into it, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "East side, duplex on Carver Street. Get here now." Tasha pressed her sleeve to her shoulder, blood seeping through, her breath hitching as she pieced it together. They'd traced her, hunted her here, and that shot wasn't a warning. It was a miss. Pruitt and Holt, or their cronies, had upped the game from fists to bullets, the tape's threat a match to their fuse. She staggered up, legs shaky, the room spinning as Jade grabbed her arm. "You're hit," Jade said, panic edging her tone. But Tasha shook her head, gritting her teeth. "Flesh wound, I'm fine." She wasn't. Her shoulder burned, her ribs screamed, but she'd stitched worse in the ER, kept going when patients flatlined. She limped to the window, glass crunching under her sneakers, the truck's taillights a fading smear in the dark. "They know," she rasped, turning to Jade. "About the tape, they're desperate." Jade's eyes blazed, her lawyer's mind clicking into gear. "Then we move faster. Malik's got it. It'll hit by morning. They can't stop this." Sirens wailed closer, red and blue strobing through the broken window as cops swarmed the street. None of them Pruitt or Holt, but Tasha didn't trust a single badge. She sank back onto the couch, blood dripping onto the cushions, her hand clutching the recorder like a talisman. Jade was right. This was power, a weapon they couldn't dodge, but that shot proved they'd kill to silence it. The paramedics arrived, a blur of gloves and gauze, patching her shoulder as she stared at the wall, her mind racing. Tate's voice, looped in her head, "Keep that black trash in line," a command Pruitt and Holt had taken to heart. They'd beaten her in that alley, thought they'd crushed her, but she'd clawed back with this tape, and now they were scrambling. She winced as the medic tugged a bandage tight, her good eye narrowing. She'd tasted victory twice now, bail, then the dismissal, only to have it ripped away, but this felt different, heavier, a blow they couldn't shrug off. Jade knelt beside her, laptop open, refreshing Malik's blog. "It's uploading," she said, voice taut with anticipation. 30 minutes and Houston wakes up to Tate's filth." Tasha nodded, her swollen lips stinging as she forced a grim smile. She pictured the fallout, protests swelling, Tate's. Bench stormed, Pruitt and Holt cornered. The sniper shot was their panic, a wild swing that missed its mark, and she'd make them pay for every drop of her blood. But as the medics hauled her to a stretcher, a chill sank in. Desperation made them deadly, and she'd just lit a bigger fuse. She lay back, the stretcher's wheels rattling as they rolled her out, the night air cool against her fevered skin. The tape was out there now. A grenade lobbed into their lair and she'd savor the blast. But that truck, that bullet, they'd come for her again, harder, meaner, with no room for error. She'd survived their fists, their fire, their bomb, and now their gun. But each strike carved deeper, testing her steel. As the ambulance doors slammed, her hand tightened around the recorder, its edges digging into her palm. This was her shot, but was it enough to end them? Tasha Coleman lay on the ambulance stretcher, the wail of sirens slicing through Houston's humid night as paramedics pressed gauze to her bleeding shoulder. The sniper's bullet had grazed her, a fiery line across her skin, but the real wound was deeper. Pruitt and Holt's desperation had turned lethal, their precinct truck a ghost in the dark. Jade Marshall rode shotgun up front, her phone glued to her ear, barking at Malik from Houston Uncovered to push the recorder leak live. Tasha clutched the device, its edges biting her palm, Judge Tate's racist snarl echoing in her mind. "Keep that black trash in line, boys." That tape was her sword now, and she'd swing it hard. By dawn, the audio hit the airwaves, Malik's blog post a Molotov cocktail lobbed into Houston's sprawl. Tasha watched from a hospital bed, her shoulder stitched and bandaged, the TV bolted, to the wall blaring the fallout. A local anchor's voice trembled as she replayed Tate's words, the station cutting to shaky footage of protesters flooding downtown, their signs stabbing the sky. Tate must go. Justice for Tasha. The third ward buzzed, megaphones crackling with chants, car horns honking in solidarity. Jade perched on a plastic chair beside her, laptop glowing with live streams, her grin sharp as a blade. "We've got a hurricane," she said, scrolling. Twitter, current Tate tapes trending with millions of views. Tasha's chest swelled, a rush of power cutting through the morphine haze. The dismissal had been a flicker. This was a blaze. She pictured Tate sweating in his chambers, Pruitt and Holt squirming as their shield cracked. The hospital window rattled with distant shouts, the city's pulse quickening, and she felt it. A tide turning, her name a war cry on strangers' lips. She leaned back, the pillow stiff against her bruised neck, her swollen eyes squinting at the screen. A news ticker flashed. Mayor calls for calm amid police scandal. Calm? She smirked, tasting blood where her lip had split. This was chaos, and she'd lit the match. The storm grew wilder by noon, national outlets picking up the story, CNN and MSNBC looping the tape with grim-faced pundits. Protesters swelled outside the precinct, a sea of fists and fury, their voices a roar that shook Tasha's bones even from the sterile ward. She flipped channels, catching a live shot of a young black man, dreads swinging, shouting into a bullhorn. "Tasha's one of us. They can't silence her." Her throat tightened, pride and dread tangling. She'd wanted justice, not a movement, but here it was, raw and unstoppable, her pain a spark that set the city ablaze. Jade's phone buzzed, non-stop. Reporters begging for Tasha's voice, but she waved them off. "Not yet," Tasha rasped, her stitched shoulder throbbing. "Let it build." She felt the shift, the world watching, a spotlight too bright to snuff out. She'd survived their fists, their fire, their bomb, their bullet, and now her truth was a weapon they couldn't dodge. She closed her eyes, picturing Pruitt and Holt cornered, their badges melting under the glare. This was triumph, real and loud, a win she could taste through the antiseptic sting. Then, just past dusk, the hospital's quiet shattered. Tasha jolted awake, her sister Lena's panicked call buzzing the burner phone Jade had slipped her. "Tasha, get out!" Lena screamed, her voice a jagged sob. "They're here!" The line crackled, then died, a thud echoing before silence swallowed it. Tasha's heart slammed, her good hand ripping the IV free as she bolted upright, pain exploding through her ribs. Lena lived 10 miles north, a shotgun house in Acres Homes where Tasha had crashed after the fire. She'd sent her there to hide, to breathe, but now the wolves had found her. Jade grabbed her arm, eyes wide. "What's happening?" Tasha shoved the phone at her, already swinging her legs off the bed, the hospital gown flapping loose. "Lena! They've got Lena!" She staggered to the closet, yanking on sneakers and a borrowed jacket, her stitched shoulder screaming as she moved. Jade dialed 911, but Tasha didn't wait, adrenaline a live wire in her veins. She burst into the hall, nurses shouting as she shoved past, Jade trailing with her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. The elevator dinged too slow. She took the stairs, her sneakers pounding concrete, every step a knife in her side. They peeled out in Jade's borrowed sedan, the city a blur of neon and horns as Tasha barked directions, her voice a raw scrape. "Left on cross timbers! Faster!" The radio blared updates, the tape still dominating airwaves, but her world narrowed to Lena, 30, a teacher, her only family left, the one who'd held her when their mom died. She'd kept her out of this, safe, until now. The sedan screeched into Acres Homes, a grid of sagging porches and cracked sidewalks. Lena's house a glow of floodlights at the end of the block. Tasha's breath caught, a scream clawing up her throat. A mob swarmed the lawn, white faces twisted, with rage, hoods and bandanas hiding cowardice. 50 strong, they chanted slurs, torches flaring as they smashed windows, glass raining like shrapnel. Lena's husband, Marcus, hung from the oak out front, a rope tight around his neck. his body limp, his dark skin mottled with bruises. Tasha flung the door open, stumbling out, her legs buckling as she roared, "Marcus!" The mob turned, eyes glinting like jackals, and she saw it. Texts on a burner phone, one waved. Anonymous but signed Precinct 3, Pruitt and Holt's handiwork, a lynching ordered from the shadows. Jade yanked her back, the sedan's door a shield as rocks flew, one cracking the windshield. "Tasha, we can't!" she yelled, but Tasha fought, clawing toward Marcus, her screams drowned by the mob's howls. Sirens wailed too late, cops spilling from cruisers as the crowd scattered, torches dropped in the grass. Tasha broke free, collapsing under the oak, her hands shaking as she touched Marcus's cold feet, his wedding band glinting in the floodlight. Lena burst from the house, face streaked with tears, falling beside her, their sobs a raw duet in the night. The cops milled, batons out, but none chased the mob, their faces blank, complicit. Tasha's gaze snapped to a figure across the street, Pruitt, off-duty, leaning on an unmarked car, his buzz cut stark against the dark, Holt's bulk beside him. They smirked, a silent taunt, then slipped away as the sirens grew louder. Jade knelt with her voice breaking. They did this, the tape wasn't enough. Tasha's fists dug into the dirt, blood and tears mixing as she stared at Marcus, her brother-in-law, her rock, strung up like a trophy. The media win, the protests, the chants. It had all been a flare, a signal to the beasts she'd riled. Pruitt and Holt hadn't just struck back. They'd orchestrated a massacre, turned her victory into a noose. Lena clutched her, trembling, her voice a whisper. They said I was next. Tasha's jaw locked, teeth grinding as rage swallowed. Her grief. She'd thought the tape would cage them, end this, but they'd answered with blood, a mob their weapon, her family their target. She stood, legs shaky, pulling Lena up as cops cordoned the lawn, their flashlights sweeping the carnage. The tape had shaken their world, but not enough. They'd escalated beyond bullets to a lynching, a public execution to break her. Jade gripped her arm, eyes blazing through tears. We fight harder. This doesn't stop us. Tasha nodded, her swollen eye burning, her shoulder leaking through the stitches. She'd lost Marcus, nearly lost Lena, and the cost was a blade in her gut, but she wasn't broken yet. The night swallowed their sobs, the oak's branches creaking as Marcus hung, a silent witness to their war. Pruitt and Holt had played their ace, grinning from the shadows, but Tasha's fire still burned, fueled by loss and fury. She'd make them pay, rip their empire down, but as she held Lena, a chill sank in. They'd kill again, and she might not outrun the next blow. How's this hitting you? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you're gutted by Marcus's death and want Tasha to crush these monsters, or number 2 if you think she's in too deep to win. Smash that like button if this mob's brutality shocked you, and hit subscribe to see her next move against these killers. Can Tasha turn this tragedy into a weapon, or will Pruitt and Holt bury her family's hope for good? Stay locked in to find out what she unleashes next. Tasha Coleman knelt beneath the oak in Lena's front yard, her hands slick with dirt and tears, Marcus's lifeless body swaying above her in the humid Houston night. Lena's sobs shook beside her, a raw wail that clawed at Tasha's chest. As cops cordoned off the scene, their flashlights slicing through the dark. The mob had vanished, leaving shattered glass and smoldering torches strewn across the lawn, a racist slaughter penned by Pruitt and Holt's invisible hands. Jade Marshall stood a few feet away, phone pressed to her ear, her voice a low hiss as she demanded answers from a contact at the precinct. Tasha's stitched shoulder bled through her jacket, her swollen eye throbbing, but the pain was a dull hum beneath the grief gnawing her soul. She rose, pulling Lena into her arms, the teacher's trembling frame a fragile anchor as police radios crackled with half-hearted orders. They said I'm next, Lena whispered, her voice a broken thread, her braids tangled with sweat and fear. Tasha's jaw locked, teeth grinding as she scanned the street where Pruitt and Holt had smirked. From their unmarked car, now long gone, the tape had hit them hard, sparked a citywide roar, but this lynching was their answer. A blade to her family, a vow to bury her fight in blood. She wiped Lena's tears, her own eyes dry, rage a furnace in her gut. Not while I'm breathing, she growled, a promise etched in stone. Jade pocketed her phone, striding over with a face carved from fury. No arrests. Cops say the mob scattered too fast. Her lips curled, disgust thick in her tone. They're covering it, Tasha. This goes deeper than Pruitt and Holt. Before Tasha could respond, a shadow moved at the block's edge, a tall figure in a dark coat stepping from an unmarked SUV. He approached slow, hands raised, his badge glinting under the streetlight, FBI. Tasha tensed, her good hand balling into a fist, but Jade stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" she snapped, shielding Tasha like a guard dog. "Agent Marcus Reed," he said, voice smooth but firm, his brown skin catching the light, his gaze steady on Tasha. "I've been tracking your case. That tape, it's the tip of a bigger iceberg. Houston PD's rotten and we're closing in." He glanced at Marcus's body, his jaw tightening, a flicker of anger breaking his calm. "This wasn't random. It's why I'm here." Tasha studied him, her nurse's instinct sizing up his pulse, his stance. Late 30s, lean eyes sharp with purpose. She didn't trust badges, not after Pruitt, but his words landed heavy, a lifeline in the storm. "What do you want?" she rasped, her throat raw from screaming, her stitched shoulder leaking a fresh trickle of blood. Reed stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Protection. For you. Your sister. I can get you out of this kill zone, into a safe house. The FBI's building a case. Corruption, brutality, racketeering. You're the spark we need." Jade crossed her arms, skeptical, but Tasha's mind raced. A safe house meant breathing room. A chance to regroup, maybe strike back. She nodded, slow, her gaze flicking to Lena. "Get her safe, then we talk." Reed moved fast, ushering them into the SUV, Lena clutching Tasha's arm as Jade followed, her laptop bag slung tight. The drive blurred through Houston's neon veins, past the Third Ward's clamor, into a quiet suburb 20 miles west, the D2. Safe House was a nondescript ranch, beige siding and shuttered windows, a steel door that thudded shut behind them. Inside it smelled of dust and coffee, a bare living room with a couch, a TV, and a kitchenette stocked with cans. Reed locked the bolts, his coat off, revealing a holstered Glock. "You're off the grid here," he said, handing Tasha a burner phone. "Rest. I'll brief you tomorrow." Tasha sank onto the couch, Lena curling beside her, the teachers, sobs softening to shudders. Jade paced, her legal mind churning, muttering about subpoenas and federal leverage. Tasha's stitched shoulder ached, her ribs a cage of pain, but Reed's promise echoed, protection, a case, a way out. She exhaled, the first calm breath in days, her swollen eye drifting shut. Marcus's death was a weight she'd carry forever, but this safe house was a shield, a moment to think. She pictured Pruitt and Holt scrambling, the FBI's net tightening, and dared to hope the endgame was near. Hours later, deep in the night, the safe house's stillness shattered. A muffled thud rattled the back door, then boots stormed the hall, a dozen masked SWAT bursting in, rifles raised. Tasha jolted awake, shoving Lena behind the couch as Jade dove for her bag, her scream cut short by a gloved hand. Reed lunged for his Glock, but a baton cracked his skull, dropping him in a heap, blood pooling on the linoleum. Tasha's heart slammed, her good arm swinging a lamp at the nearest figure, glass shattering across his mask. "Run!" she yelled, but a rifle butt slammed her gut, doubling her over, air fleeing her lungs. The intruders moved like machines, black gear unmarked, their silence a blade. One yanked Lena up, her pleas swallowed by a gag, while another zip-tied Jade's wrists, her kicks useless against their bulk. Tasha fought, nails clawing a mask, drawing blood, but a second blow crashed into her temple, stars exploding in her vision. She hit the floor, the safe house spinning, Reed's limp form a blur as two agents lay dead by the kitchen, throats slit, their blood a slick river. Her stitched shoulder tore open, fresh crimson soaking her jacket, but she crawled, reaching for Lena's ankle as they dragged her sister out. "Precinct sends regards," a masked voice rasped, Pruitt's twang unmistakable beneath the distortion, his grey eyes glinting through the slits. Holt's bulk loomed behind, a knife flashing as he cut the zip ties off a third figure, a decoy agent who smirked and bolted with them. Tasha's scream lodged in her throat, her good hand clawing the carpet as they vanished into the night, the back door banging shut. She staggered up, blood dripping from her temple, her ribs screaming, and stumbled to Reed, shaking him. "Wake up!" she croaked, his pulse faint under her fingers. The safe house a tomb. She found the burner phone smashed under a boot, its screen a spiderweb of cracks. Jade groaned, zip ties cutting her wrists, her face pale as she coughed. "They knew," Jade rasped, spitting blood. "Inside job." Tasha's mind reeled, piecing it. Pruitt and Holt had cronies in the FBI, had tracked Reed's move, turned Sanctuary into slaughter. 2 agents dead, Lena gone, Reed out cold. She was alone again, hunted, the safe house a trap they'd sprung. With surgical precision. She tore a strip from her jacket, binding Reed's head, her nurse's hands steady despite the tremor in her core. The ranch's silence pressed in, the hum of crickets a cruel mockery as blood pooled around the dead agents. Tasha's swollen eye burned, her stitched shoulder afire, but she stood dragging Jade to her feet, cutting her ties with a kitchen knife. "We're not safe anywhere," she said, voice a jagged edge, her gaze on the door where they'd taken Lena. Reed stirred, groaning, his hand twitching toward his Glock, but Tasha knew it. The feds were breached, the cops untouchable, and her sister was their prize. She'd trusted Reed, let hope flicker, thought the FBI could end this nightmare. Now Marcus hung from an oak, Lena was a hostage, and the safe house was a grave. Pruitt and Holt had flipped the board, their reach a noose tightening around her neck. She gripped the knife, its blade catching the dim light, her mind a storm of loss and fury. They'd taken everything, her home, her car, her family, but she was still here, bleeding but unbroken. Jade steadied her, eyes blazing. "We get Lena back. Then we gut them." Tasha nodded, her good hand trembling as she wiped blood from her lip, tasting iron. The tape had shaken them, the mob had struck, and now this raid proved they'd kill to win. She'd walked into Reed's promise blind, and they'd answered with a massacre. As she dragged Reed to the couch, his pulse, steadying, a chill sank in. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, and the next blow might be the one she couldn't dodge. Tasha Coleman stood in the blood-streaked safe house, the kitchen knife trembling in her good hand, as Jade Marshall cut her own zip ties free, the plastic snapping under the blade. Agent Marcus Reed groaned on the couch, his head bandaged with Tasha's torn jacket sleeve, his pulse steady but weak after the SWAT ambush. 2 FBI agents lay dead by the kitchenette, throats slashed, their blood a dark pool reflecting the flickering ceiling light. Lena was gone, dragged off by Pruitt, and Holt's masked cronies, her muffled screams echoing in Tasha's skull. The safehouse's promise of refuge had crumbled into a slaughter pen, and fury burned through her grief, a wildfire she couldn't douse. She staggered to the sink, splashing water on her swollen face, the cold stinging her split lip as she stared at her reflection. One eye puffed shut, shoulder stitches torn open, blood crusting her braids. "They've got Lena," she rasped, turning to Jade, her voice a jagged shard. "And they think I'll fold." Jade's eyes blazed, her wrists raw from the ties, but she nodded, grabbing her laptop from the floor. Its screen cracked but glowing. "They're wrong," she said, booting it up. "We hit back hard." Tasha's mind raced, her nurse's precision slicing through the chaos. Pruitt and Holt had breached the FBI, turned Reed's plan into a massacre, but she wasn't done. She'd survived their fists, their fire, their bomb, their bullet, and now this raid, each blow forged her sharper, angrier. "Emails," she said, sudden and sharp, leaning over Jade's shoulder. "They're cocky. Pruitt's got to have dirt somewhere." Jade's brow arched, catching her drift, and she cracked her knuckles, diving into the dark web contacts she'd used for the leak. "I know a nurse who hacks," Tasha added, pacing despite the pain in her ribs. "Priya from St. Luke's. She's quiet, but she's good." Jade dialed Priya on the burner Reed had left, her voice low and urgent as Tasha patched her shoulder with a dish towel, blood soaking through the cotton. Priya arrived in 20 minutes, a petite woman with a pixie cut and a laptop bag slung, like a weapon, her scrub still speckled from a late shift. She hugged Tasha, quick, her eyes widening at the carnage, but she set up fast, cables snaking across the coffee table. "Pruitt's precinct emails our target," Tasha said, her good hand clenched. "He's not smart enough to cover tracks." Priya nodded, fingers flying over keys, her software cracking firewalls like brittle glass. Hours bled into the night, the safe house a tomb of tension, Reed stirring but silent, his Glock clutched in his lap. Priya's screen flashed, a triumphant beep piercing the quiet. "Got it," she whispered, pulling up Pruitt's inbox, a cesspool of unencrypted filth. Tasha leaned in, her swollen eye squinting at the proof. Emails to Holt and precinct brass, detailing a racket extorting black-owned businesses across Houston, barbershops, diners, corner stores shaken down for cash, beatings for refusal, all funneled to a slush fund Tate controlled. One thread gloated about teaching that nurse a lesson, time-stamped the night her apartment burned. Jade's grin was feral, her legal mind already weaponizing it. "This is a gold mine," she said, copying files to a thumb drive. "Racketeering. Corruption, conspiracy, it's federal meat." Tasha's chest tightened, a surge of power cutting through her pain. She saw Lena's face, Marcus's limp form, and channeled it into this, evidence that could gut Pruitt and Holt, drag their empire into the light. "We air it," she said, voice steel. "Live. No delays." Jade nodded, syncing with Malik at Houston Uncovered, setting up a podcast stream for dawn. Millions of ears waiting after the tape storm. The broadcast hit at 6 a.m., Tasha's voice raw but steady over the mic. Jade beside her, Priya's laptop streaming live from the safe house's battered table. "They burned my home, bombed. My car lynched my brother-in-law," Tasha said, her good eye blazing into the webcam, blood crusted on her cheek. "Now they've got my sister. This is what they're hiding." Jade read the emails, her tone a scalpel, each line a cut. Pruitt's orders to squeeze the third ward dry. Holt's boasts of breaking kneecaps. Tate's sign-offs on keeping it quiet. Priya flashed screenshots, the precinct's logo stark against the corruption. Houston erupted, the stream's view count rocketing past 1 million in hours. Tweets flooding with "Host take down Tate," "A free Lena." Protesters stormed City Hall, tires burning in the streets, the mayor's press conference drowned by chants. Tasha watched. From the safe house, the TV blaring updates, her stitched shoulder throbbing as hope flared. The mayor caved by noon, suspending Pruitt and Holt pending a probe, their badge photos plastered across every channel. She sank onto the couch, a ragged laugh escaping her split lip. "We've got them," she said, Jade clapping her back, Priya's shy smile breaking through her focus. She pictured Lena free, Pruitt and Holt cuffed, their racket crumbling under the weight of her fight. The safe house felt lighter, Reed stirring with a groan, his eyes clearing as he caught the news. "Good work," he mumbled, voice thick, and Tasha nodded, tasting triumph, real and close. She'd flipped their game, turned their arrogance into chains, and the world was watching. She leaned back, exhaustion tugging, her good hand tracing the knife's edge on the table. This was it, their knees buckling, her blade at their throat. Then just past 3 p.m., the safe house's quiet snapped. A low hum buzzed outside, a shadow flickering over the shuttered windows. Tasha frowned, stepping to the blinds, her heart lurching as a drone hovered, its lens glinting like an eye. Before she could shout, a crash split the air. A Molotov cocktail smashing through the glass, flames exploding across the floor. She dove, shoving Priya under the table as Jade yanked Reed down, fire roaring up the walls, smoke choking the room. Tasha's stitched shoulder screamed, her ribs a cage of pain as she crawled, the heat searing her face. "Out!" she yelled, kicking the back door, but it jammed. The frame warped from the raid. The drone buzzed louder, a second bottle arcing through, blasting the couch into a pyre. She grabbed a chair, smashing the kitchen window, glass raining as she pushed Priya through, Jade dragging Reed behind. Tasha stumbled to the ledge, flames licking her heels, when a voice crackled from a burner phone dropped in the chaos. Holt's growl, thick with glee. "You'll burn before we fall." She leapt, hitting the grass outside, rolling as the safe house erupted, a fireball swallowing her scream. Her good hand clawed the dirt, her lungs heaving smoke. Priya coughing beside her, Jade shielding Reed as debris rained. The drone vanished, its hum fading into the sirens wailing too late. Tasha staggered up, blood and soot streaking her face, her borrowed jacket charred at the edges. She'd nearly died again, her wind torched by their counterstrike. Holt's voice a promise they'd never quit. The suspension meant nothing. They'd burned her out, taken Lena, and now this. She stood, legs trembling, watching the ranch collapse, her knife lost in the blaze. Jade gripped her arm, eyes wild. "We're alive, that's enough." But Tasha's good eye narrowed, rage a live wire in her veins. She'd hit them hard, forced their hand, but they'd answered with fire, a death trap she'd barely escaped. Priya clutched her laptop, miraculously intact, the stream still live, millions witnessing the inferno. She'd thought the emails would end it, cage them, but Pruitt and Holt had claws deeper than she'd dreamed, their reach a venom that struck from the sky. As firefighters swarmed, hoses blasting, Tasha's mind churned. Lena was out there, a hostage to their spite, and this was just their opening salvo. She wiped soot from her lip, tasting ash, her resolve hardening. They'd burn the world to stop her, but she'd rise from every flame. What's your pulse racing for? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you're cheering Tasha's hack that shook the city, or number 2 if you think she's pushing too far against these killers. Smash that like button if this firebomb twist floored you, and hit subscribe to catch her next strike against these monsters. Can Tasha claw Lena back from their grip, or will this blaze be the spark that consumes her fight? Keep watching to see what she pulls from the ashes next. Tasha Coleman stumbled from the safe house's smoldering wreckage, soot blackening her face, her stitched shoulder bleeding through the charred remnants of her borrowed jacket. Jade Marshall dragged Agent Marcus Reed clear, his head still bandaged, while Priya clutched her scorched laptop, the live stream flickering with the fire's roar. The drone's Molotov cocktails had turned sanctuary into ash, Holt's voice on the burner phone a taunt that burned hotter than the flames. "You'll burn before we fall." Tasha's good eye stung, her ribs a cage of pain, but she stood, firm, watching firefighters battle the blaze as sirens wailed through the Houston suburb. Lena was still out there, a hostage to Pruitt and Holt's spite, and this inferno was their latest strike to break her. Jade's phone buzzed, Malik from Houston uncovered, shouting through static. "The stream's at 5 million. Feds are moving. Trials. Set." Tasha's jaw tightened, her split lip cracking as she nodded. The leaked emails, Pruitt's extortion racket exposed live, had forced a federal hand. Reed coughed, staggering up, his Glock dangling from a shaky hand. "Racketeering charges," he rasped, voice thick with pain. "They can't dodge this." Tasha's chest heaved, a flicker of hope piercing the smoke. She'd hit them with the podcast, turned their arrogance into a noose, and now a courtroom. Awaited. A real shot to end them. 3 days later, she walked into the U.S. District Court in downtown Houston, a fortress of glass and stone ringed by protesters chanting her name. Her borrowed suit chafed her bandaged shoulder, her swollen eye hidden behind sunglasses Jade had scrounged. But she held her head high, every step a defiance of the bruises mapping her body. Jade flanked her, legal files stacked in her arms, Priya's hacked emails printed and bound, a weapon heavier than any knife. Reed trailed, limping but sharp, his FBI badge glinting as marshals cleared their path through the scrum of reporters and flashing cameras. The courtroom buzzed, a packed gallery of activists, journalists, and stone-faced cops in civvies, glaring from the back. Pruitt and Holt sat at the defense table, suspended but uncuffed, their precinct lawyer whispering in their ears, his suit crisp against their rumpled defiance. Tasha caught Pruitt's grey eyes, a smirk twitching his lips, Holt's meaty fists flexing on the table. She stared back unblinking, her nurses calm a shield as Jade laid out the case. The judge, a stern black woman named Ellis, peered over her glasses, her gavel a quiet threat as she called order. Jade opened with fire, her voice slicing the room. Officers Pruitt and Holt ran a racket extorting black businesses, falsifying. "Arrests terrorizing Houston's 3rd Ward," she said, slamming the email printouts on the bench. They burned Tasha Coleman's home, bombed her car, orchestrated a lynching and attacked an FBI safe house. This is their empire. She played the podcast audio, Tasha's raw testimony filling the air, followed by Pruitt's emails, each line a nail in their coffin. The jury, a mix of wary faces, leaned forward, some scribbling, others paling as the scope sank in. Tasha took the stand, her hands steady despite the tremor in her legs, her voice a blade honed by loss. "I'm a nurse," she said, facing the jury, her sunglasses off, swollen eye bare. "I save lives. They pulled me over for nothing, beat me, burned my world, killed my brother-in-law, took my sister. These emails prove it's not just me, it's a system they've rigged." She pointed at Pruitt and Holt, her good hand unwavering. "They think they're untouchable. They're wrong." The gallery murmured. A ripple of nods, the air thick with tension as Ellis's gaze flicked to the cops, her lips a thin line. The prosecution piled on, Reed testifying through gritted teeth about the safe house raid, Priya detailing the hack. With quiet precision, her laptop scars a badge of honor. The emails flashed on a screen, Pruitt's words in stark black. "Squeeze 'em till they bleed cash," Holt's reply. "Nurse'll learn her place." The jury shifted, eyes hardening. A tide Tasha felt turning. She sat beside Jade, her stitched shoulder throbbing, tasting victory's edge, real, close, a hammer poised to smash their throne. Pruitt's smirk faded, Holt's fists clenching. Tighter, their lawyer scrambling with objections. Ellis swatted down. Mid-trial day 4, the air shifted. Judge Ellis pounded her gavel, silencing a buzzing gallery, her voice crisp. "Recess. 1 hour." Tasha frowned, Jade whispering, "Something's up." They filed out, the hall a swarm of reporters, but Ellis vanished into chambers, her absence a void that gnawed Tasha's gut. An hour stretched to 2, then 3, the courtroom emptying as whispers grew. Tate was gone. Clarence Tate, the good old boy who'd dismissed her first case, who'd snarled on the recorder, had been a ghost witness, subpoenaed but missing. Tasha's hope teetered, her good hand gripping Jade's arm as marshals hustled them back. In a new judge swept onto the bench, a wiry white man with a buzz cut and a scowl, his robe crisp as he slammed the gavel. "Judge Hargrove," he barked, voice a whip. "Ellis recused, I'm taking over." Tasha's stomach dropped, Jade's hiss sharp in her ear. "He's precinct-friendly. Bad news." Hargrove glared at the jury, then the defense, his words, a gut punch. Mistrial, tainted proceedings, evidence compromised by leaks. The gallery erupted, shouts clashing with groans, Tasha's breath freezing as Pruitt smirked anew, Holt's shoulders relaxing. Jade leapt up, slamming her files. "This is sabotage," she yelled, but Hargrove's gavel drowned her, his scowl a wall. "Order, case dismissed, jury discharged." Tasha sat, numb, her good eye burning as the jury filed out, confusion on their faces, the wind slipping through, her fingers like smoke. She'd swayed them, bared their filth, but Hargrove's ruling was a blade, Tate's vanishing a shadow play she hadn't seen coming. Jade gripped her shoulder, voice low. They rigged it. Tate's their ace. Night fell. Tasha and Jade holed up in a motel off I-10, the TV replaying Hargrove's dismissal, pundits spinning it as procedural error. She paced, her stitched shoulder leaking, her ribs a dull ache. When the door burst open, 3 figures. Lunging in, Pruitt, Holt, and a masked man, his bulk familiar under the hood. Tasha dove for the lamp, swinging it wild, but Pruitt's fist cracked her jaw, dropping her to the carpet. Holt pinned Jade, her screams muffled as the masked figure loomed, a knife flashing in his gloved hand. Tasha kicked, her sneaker slamming. Pruitt's knee, but Holt's boot crashed into her side, ribs snapping anew, pain a white-hot flare. The masked man knelt, his breath sour as he carved into her arm, the blade etching coon in jagged red, blood welling fast. "You'll never speak again," he rasped, voice a drawl she knew. Clarence Tate, alive, unmasked, as he yanked. The hood back, his jowls quivering with glee. Pruitt laughed, Holt's grip tightening on Jade. The motel's dim light glinting off the knife as Tate slashed again, a second slur scarring her flesh. They dumped her, bleeding, on the carpet, Jade's gasps fading as they dragged her out, the door slamming shut. Tasha crawled, blood pooling, her good hand clawing for the burner phone under the bed. She dialed Reed, voice a rasp as he picked up. Tate's alive. Tortured me. Took Jade. The line crackled, Reed's shout faint as she blacked out, the phone slipping, her arm a canvas of hate. The trial's edge had been a trap, Hargrove's mistrial a gift, and Tate's disappearance a lie. They'd played her, and this was their encore. She woke to paramedics, lights strobing through, the motel window her arm bandaged, pain a dull roar. Reed knelt beside her, face grim, Jade gone, Lena still lost. The system wasn't just bent, it was theirs. Tate pulling strings from the shadows, Pruitt and Holt his fists. She'd nearly won, felt the jury's sway, but they'd flipped the board, carved their hate into her skin and left her broken. Yet her good eye flickered, rage a ember in the dark. They'd misjudged her steel, and she'd make them bleed for it. Tasha Coleman lay crumpled on the motel carpet, blood oozing from the racial slurs carved into her arm, the knife's sting a fire that matched the ache in her cracked ribs. Pruitt, Holt, and Clarence Tate had stormed in, tortured her, and dragged Jade out into the Houston night, their laughter a venomous echo as the door slammed shut. Her good hand fumbled for the burner phone, dialing Agent Reed before darkness swallowed her, her rasped plea, "Tate's alive." Tortured me. Took Jade. Fading into a void. The mistrial had been a setup, Hargrove's ruling a puppet show, and Tate's disappearance a cruel lie that left her broken, bleeding, and alone. Paramedics jolted her awake, their gloved hands a blur as they strapped her to a stretcher. The motel's flickering neon strobing through the window. Her arm throbbed under fresh bandages, coon and bitch etched in red beneath the gauze, a racist brand she couldn't unfeel. Reed burst in, his head still wrapped from the safe house raid, his Glock drawn as he barked at the medics to move faster. "She's critical," one snapped, wheeling her out, the stretcher's wheels rattling over cracked pavement as sirens wailed. Tasha's swollen eye fluttered, her voice a whisper. "Lena, Jade, find them." The hospital was a haze of antiseptic and beeping monitors, her arm stitched again, ribs taped tight, painkillers dulling the edges, but not the weight. Reed sat beside her bed, his face a mask of guilt and fury, his coat slung over a chair. "Tate's alive," he said, voice low. "We thought he'd bolted after the subpoena, but he's their linchpin. Pruitt and Holt are off the grid too, suspended, not caged." Tasha's good hand clenched the sheets, her split lip cracking as she spoke. "They've got my sister, my lawyer. They won't stop." Reed nodded, pulling a tablet from his bag, its screen glowing with files. "The emails, the tape. They're enough for arrests, but Tate's pull runs deep. We're digging." Tasha's mind churned, her nurse's precision fighting the fog. She'd swayed the jury, exposed their racket, only to have Hargrove snatch it away, Tate's knife twisting the loss into her flesh. She sat up, wincing, her good eye narrowing. "Dig faster, I'm not waiting." Reed hesitated, but she cut him off. "They think I'm done. They're wrong." Discharged by dawn, she limped to a new hideout, a friend's garage apartment in Montrose, a cluttered box of exposed brick and mismatched furniture. Reed drove, his SUV weaving through Houston's sprawl, while Tasha sat shotgun, her bandaged arm stiff, her ribs a dull ache. Jade's absence gnawed at her, Lena's fate a noose around her heart, Marcus's lynched body a ghost in her vision. She'd lost everything, home, car, family, to Pruitt and Holt's war, and the trial's collapse was a gut punch she couldn't shake. But surrender wasn't in her blood. Inside, she sank onto a sagging couch, Reed booting up his tablet, pulling classified intel from an FBI server. "Tate's tied to something bigger," he said, scrolling through grainy photos. Tate shaking hands with suited men, a logo on a building, Texas Liberty Front, a hate network bankrolling cops statewide. Tasha's good eye widened, tracing the threads, Tate's slush fund, Pruitt's extortion, Holt's muscle, all feeding a beast that thrived on her people's pain. "They're not just dirty," she rasped, voice raw. "They're a machine." Reed tapped a file, a blurry shot of Tate at a rally, hooded figures in the background. "This network's got cash, reach. They've been shielding Pruitt and Holt for years, arson, beatings, worse." Tasha's jaw tightened, her good hand tracing the bandages, The slurs a map of their hate. She'd thought it was personal, a vendetta for the tape, but this was systemic, a hydra with Tate at its head. "Send it," she said, nodding at the tablet. "All of it. FBI's got to move now." Reed hesitated, his fingers hovering. "It's raw, unverified. If we rush—" Tasha cut him off, her voice a blade. "They've got Lena. Jade. Marcus is dead. Rush it." He nodded, encrypting the data, firing it to his superiors. A Hail Mary to a bureaucracy she didn't trust. She leaned back, exhaustion pulling, her swollen eye drifting shut. The emails had suspended them, the tape had rattled them, and now, this could end them. Arrests, raids, a federal hammer to smash their throne. She dared to breathe, hope a fragile spark in the dark. By noon, Reed's phone buzzed, his boss's voice crackling through. "Warrants out. Pruitt and Holt nabbed at a stash house in Pasadena. Tate's still AWOL, but we're closing in." Tasha's chest loosened, a ragged sigh escaping her split lip as she collapsed onto the couch, the springs creaking under her weight. "They're caught," she whispered, picturing Pruitt's grey eyes behind bars, Holt's fists caged, Lena's freedom close. Reed grinned, a rare crack in his stoicism. "You did this, Tasha, it's over." She let it sink in, the garage's quiet wrapping her like a bomb. Marcus's death, Lena's screams, Jade's fight. They'd cost her everything, but Pruitt and Holt were down, their empire teetering. She closed her good eye, exhaustion claiming her, the painkillers softening her edges. She'd fought their fire, their bullets, their knives, and won. Arrests, not promises, a real blow. Sleep tugged, her bandaged arm heavy, her spirit flickering but alive. It was done, or so she thought. Night fell. The garage bathed in shadow. When a blast shook the walls, glass shattering as a fireball engulfed Reed's SUV outside. Tasha jolted awake, rolling off the couch, her ribs screaming as she hit the floor. Reed dove for his Glock, shouting, "Get down!" But the door burst. Open, Pruitt and Holt storming in free, their eyes wild with rage. A prison break, impossibly fast, Tate's network flexing its claws. Pruitt's fist cracked Reed's jaw, dropping him, while Holt grabbed Tasha, slamming her against the brick, her stitched shoulder tearing anew. She fought, her good hand clawing. Holt's face, nails drawing blood, but Pruitt's boot crashed into her knee, buckling her. "Thought you'd cage us?" Pruitt snarled, his buzz cut glinting under the bulb as he yanked her up, breath sour with hate. Holt lumbered out, returning with Jade, bound, gagged, her suit torn, eyes wide with terror. Tasha's scream lodged in her throat as Pruitt dragged her to the window, forcing her to watch. Jade's car, parked down the block, exploded in a roar of flame, her lawyer's body inside, a fiery tomb that swallowed her gasps. Tasha collapsed, Holt's grip loosening as she hit the floor. Jade's burning silhouette searing her vision. "No!" she roared, voice breaking, her good hand clawing the carpet as Pruitt laughed, a guttural sound that drowned her sobs. "Tate says hi," Holt growled, kicking her ribs, pain exploding white-hot. They bolted, tires screeching outside, leaving, her with Reed's limp form, Jade's ashes, and a shattered hope. The arrests had been a mirage, a tease undone by a network too deep to crack, and now Jade was gone, Lena still lost. She crawled to Reed, shaking him, his pulse faint under her trembling fingers, blood pooling from his jaw. The garage reeked, of smoke. The SUV's blaze lighting the night as sirens wailed too late. Tasha's good eye streamed, her bandaged arm slick with fresh blood, her ribs a shattered cage. She'd thought she'd won, felt their chains snap. But Tate's machine had ripped them free, torched her last ally, and left her in ruin. Her spirit flickered, a candle in a gale, as she cradled Jade's loss, Marcus's ghost, Lena's absence, a breaking point she couldn't outrun. She staggered up, dragging Reed to the couch, her nurse's hands binding his wounds with a torn shirt, her mind a storm of despair and defiance. They'd taken everything, carved her flesh, burned her world, but she was alive barely, her pulse a stubborn beat. The FBI's move had failed, the network's reach a noose, and Pruitt and Holt danced free, their victory a blade in her gut. She sank beside Reed, blood and tears mixing, her good hand trembling as she gripped his Glock, its weight a cold promise. They'd pushed her to the edge, but she wouldn't fall. Not yet. Slumped beside Agent Marcus Reed on the garage apartment's couch, her bandaged arm slick with blood, her good eye burning as Jade's fiery death replayed in her mind. The SUV's wreckage smoldered outside, a twin to the car. Bomb that had claimed her lawyer Pruitt and Holt's prison break a brutal encore to their escape from justice. Reed's pulse thrummed faint under her fingers, his jaw swollen from Pruitt's fist, the Glock she'd clutched slipping to the floor. Lena was still a hostage. Marcus lynched, Jade ash, her world a graveyard carved by Tate's hate network, and the arrests she'd pinned her hope on had crumbled into dust. Sirens wailed closer, red and blue strobing through the shattered window. As Tasha staggered up, her ribs a cage of pain, her stitched shoulder leaking through the gauze, she dragged Reed to the wall, propping him as firefighters swarmed the blaze, their shouts a dull roar against the ringing in her ears. Her good hand trembled, wiping blood from her split lip, tasting iron as her nurse's mind catalogued her wounds. Cracked ribs, torn stitches, a body pushed past, breaking. But surrender wasn't in her veins. She'd survived their fire, their knives, their noose, and she'd fight with whatever scraps remained. Reed stirred, coughing blood, his eyes clearing as he gripped her arm. "Tasha," he rasped, voice a thread, "you're not just a nurse. You're one of us." She froze, her swollen eye narrowing, his words a jolt through the haze. "FBI," he said, pulling a hidden badge from his coat, its seal glinting in the flickering light. "Planted you here 3 years ago undercover to bait this ring. Didn't expect it to blow up like this." Her breath hitched, a storm of shock and rage crashing through her skull. "What?" she croaked, her good hand balling into a fist. The room spinning as truth rewrote her hell. "Quantico trained you," Reed said, wincing as he sat up, his head bandage soaked red. "Memories buried, standard for deep cover. You're Agent Coleman, tasked to expose Houston's corruption from the ground. The stop, the tape, the leaks. You played it perfect, even blind." Tasha's jaw locked, her good eye darting, as fragments clicked. Her calm under cuffs, her instinct to record Tate, her relentless push against odds no civilian could bear. She'd thought it was grit, survival, but it was training, a shadow life she'd lived and lost. "Why tell me now?" she growled, her voice a blade, betrayal, cutting deeper than Tate's knife. "They've pushed too far," Reed said, his Glock steadying in his lap. "Tate's network, Pruitt, Holt, we've got enough to end them, but they're loose, lethal. We stage you now, draw them out." Tasha's mind raced, her nurse's mask peeling to reveal the agent beneath, a weapon, forged in their fire. Lena's screams, Marcus's noose, Jade's blaze, they weren't just personal. They were the mission's cost, a trap she'd baited without knowing. She nodded, slow, her good hand steadying. "Set it up. I'm done running." Reed called it in, his burner buzzing with encrypted orders, the FBI scrambling a sting from Houston's shadows. By dawn, Tasha stood in a warehouse 10 miles east, a cavern of rust and concrete rigged with cameras, mics, and hidden agents. She wore a wire under a borrowed hoodie, her bandaged arm bare, the slurs carved by Tate a taunt she'd wield. Reed briefed her, limping beside a tech van outside, his voice low. "We've leaked you're surrendering. Live on Malik's stream. They'll come. Pruitt, Holt, Tate, we take them here." The broadcast hit at noon, Tasha's face filling screens nationwide, her swollen eyes stark, her voice raw but firm. "I'm done fighting," she said, standing in the warehouse's dim light, the feed cutting to millions via Houston Uncovered. "Pruitt, Holt, Tate, you win. I'm here, alone. Come get me." She dropped the mic, her good hand trembling. As she stepped back, the liar beaconed to draw their fangs. Protesters paused, newsrooms buzzed, the city holding its breath as her surrender spread, a gambit Reed swore would work. Hours ticked, the warehouse silent but for the hum of hidden tech. Tasha pacing the cold floor, her ribs aching, her stitched shoulder a dull fire. Then headlights pierced the dusk. A black van screeching to a halt outside, Pruitt and Holt bursting in, Tate trailing with a limp, his jowls quivering under a hood he shed fast. Their eyes glinted with triumph, Pruitt's buzz cut stark, Holt's fists flexing, Tate's knife gleaming in his gloved hand. "Knew you'd break," Pruitt snarled, stepping close, his breath sour as he grabbed her arm, twisting the bandages, blood welling anew. Tasha smirked, her good eye locking his, a spark they didn't see. "You're late," she said, voice steel, and Holt lunged, his meaty hand clamping her throat. Tate laughed, raising the knife, his drawl thick. "Should have burned proper." She didn't flinch, her wire buzzing live, her surrender a mask as footsteps thundered from the rafters. FBI agents swarmed, rifles raised, Reed shouting, "Down!" Pruitt spun, Holt roared, but Tate moved faster, his knife slashing air as he bolted for a crate, his hand yanking a detonator from his coat. A boom shook the warehouse, the crate erupting. In a fireball, concrete raining as Tasha dove, her good hand shielding her face. Reed tackled Pruitt, Holt firing wild, bullets pinging steel as agents returned shots, their vests soaking hits. Tasha crawled through smoke, her ribs screaming, spotting Tate's limp form near the blast, his detonator sparking. She lunged, dragging Reed from the chaos, his leg bleeding from shrapnel, her stitched shoulder tearing wider. The warehouse buckled, beams crashing, agents shouting as Pruitt and Holt vanished in the haze, their laughter a ghost through the roar. She staggered out, Reed leaning on her, blood and soot streaking her face as the van peeled away, Pruitt's grey eyes glinting. From the window, Holt's bulk beside him. The sting had backfired. Tate's bomb a wild card that cracked her trap, agents down, the warehouse a ruin. She sank to the dirt, her good hand clutching Reed, her swollen eyes streaming as firefighters swarmed, hoses blasting the blaze. "They're gone," she rasped, voice breaking, the wire dead under her hoodie, her big reveal a bust swallowed by chaos. Reed coughed, his Glock lost, his face grim. "We had them," he said, blood dripping from his leg, but Tasha shook her head, her good hand trembling. She'd played the agent, baited the trap, but Tate's desperation had flipped it. Pruitt and Holt slipping free, Lena still their prize. The warehouse glowed, a pyre of her plan, agents hauling wounded from the rubble, their shouts a dull hum against her ringing ears. She'd thought her cover, her fight, would end it, but they'd danced out of her grasp, their laughter a blade in her gut. She stood, legs shaky, her stitched shoulder afire, her ribs a shattered cage, watching the flames lick the sky. The FBI's move, her surrender, had been her ace, a checkmate she'd felt in her bones, but Tate's bomb had turned it to ash. Pruitt and Holt were loose. Tate may be dead in the wreckage, but she couldn't tell, the smoke too thick, the cost too high. She'd lost Jade, Marcus, nearly Lena, and now this. Her agent steel tested, bent but not broken. She wiped blood from her lip, tasting ash, her good eye narrowing as Reed gripped her arm, his voice a lifeline. "We're not done." Tasha Coleman knelt in the dirt outside the burning warehouse, her good hand clutching Agent Marcus Reed's arm as flames devoured the trap she'd set. The FBI sting had crumbled, Tate's bomb ripping through concrete and steel, Pruitt and Holt slipping free in the chaos, their van's taillights a taunt swallowed by Houston's night. Her stitched shoulder bled through the charred hoodie, her ribs a shattered cage, her swollen eye streaming as soot blackened her face. Lena was still their hostage, Jade's ashes fresh in her memory, Marcus's lynched body a ghost, her agents. Reveal had been a gamble and she'd lost, the warehouse a pyre of her checkmate. Reed staggered up, his leg oozing from shrapnel, his head bandage soaked red, barking into a radio for backup as agents hauled wounded from the rubble. Tasha's good ear rang, the blast's echo drowning their shouts, her mind a storm of fury and fracture. She'd played her cover, baited Pruitt, Holt and Tate with her surrender, but the detonator had flipped the board, their escape, a blade in her gut. She scanned the wreckage, her good eye squinting through smoke, Tate's limp form lost in the haze, dead or alive she couldn't tell, and it gnawed her raw. Then a glint caught her gaze, a cracked burner phone half buried. In the dirt, its screen flickering alive. She snatched it, her good hand trembling, Holt's last taunt looping in her skull. "You'll burn before we fall." The display glowed, a live stream running, Pruitt's grey eyes staring back, his buzz cut stark as he smirked from the van. "Thought you'd trap us, nurse?" he sneered, Holt's meaty laugh rumbling beside him. Tate's jowls quivering in the frame, alive, bloodied but grinning. Tasha's breath hitched, rage a furnace in her chest. They'd survived, turned. Her sting into their stage, but the stream wasn't theirs. Her good eye widened, recognizing the interface. Malik's Houston uncovered feed hijacked days ago when Priya hacked Pruitt's email. She'd rigged a back door, a silent feed Tasha had forgotten in the chaos, now broadcasting live to millions. Her voice broke through, not theirs, a recording she'd made in the safe house, raw and unyielding. Pruitt and Holt extort our streets, beat our people, burn our homes. Tate shields them, a racist pulling strings. They lynched my brother-in-law, took my sister, torched my lawyer. This is their truth. The audio looped, her testimony a hammer, emails flashing across the screen, Tate's tape snarling in sync. Tasha's lips twitched, a grim smirk splitting her split lip as the van's feed cut. Pruitt's smirk freezing, Holt's laugh choking off. She stood, legs shaky, clutching the phone as sirens swelled, the nation erupting in real time. Twitter exploded. There's Tate tapes live trending past 10 million, protesters flooding Houston's streets, tires burning, chants roaring her name. The stream's counter ticked, 15 million, 20, her hack a wildfire they couldn't douse. She'd lost the trap, but this was her ace, a reversal she'd planted blind, now blooming in their faces. Reed limped beside her, radio crackling with updates, his eyes widening at the phone. "You did this?" he rasped, voice thick with awe. Tasha nodded, her good hand steadying, blood dripping from her stitched shoulder as she watched the screen. Live footage cut in. Pruitt's van swarmed by a mob 2 miles out, fists pounding steel, rocks shattering glass. Holt fired wild, bullets sparking asphalt, but the crowd surged, a sea of rage dragging them out, Tate's hood torn off as he screamed, his knife useless against the tide. Cops flooded the scene too late, their batons swinging as Pruitt and Holt were cuffed, bloodied and raging, Tate's jowls quivering as marshals hauled him down. The stream caught it all, Tasha's voice a relentless undercurrent, her evidence a noose tightening with every frame. She sank to the dirt, her good eye locked on the phone, the nation's roar a balm to her wounds. "Got you," she whispered, her split lip bleeding anew, a dark laugh escaping as firefighters doused the warehouse, steam rising like ghosts. Reed knelt, his shrapnel-torn leg trembling, his radio buzzing with FBI orders. Suspects detained, federal charges pending. Tasha's chest heaved, relief a flood through her battered frame. Her agent's steel bending but unbroken. She'd walked into their fire, baited their trap and lost. Until this, a hack she'd rigged as a failsafe, now a hammer smashing their empire. Protesters cheered, news choppers buzzing overhead, the Third Ward a fortress of fists and fury. Pruitt's grey eyes glared from the screen. Holt's fists pounded a cruiser's hood. Tate's drawl silenced by cuffs. They were cornered, aired, done. She limped off, Reed's arm around her, the phone clutched tight, its battery dying as the stream looped her voice, a victory carved from ash. "I'm done," she rasped, her good eye drifting to the sky, dawn breaking over Houston's sprawl, a lighter world despite the scars mapping her skin. The warehouse smoldered, agents swarming, but her fight felt over. Lena's fate still hung, a thread she'd chase, but Pruitt, Holt, and Tate were caged, their network exposed, her truth a blade that cut deeper than their knives. Reed steadied, her, his limp matching hers, his voice low as they reached an FBI van. "You're a hell of an agent, Coleman." She nodded, too tired to argue, her good hand slipping the phone into her pocket. Its screen black, but its work alive in the streets. The mob's cheers faded, sirens a dull hum, and she exhaled, free but scarred, her spirit a ember that refused to die. She'd fought as a nurse, lived as an agent and won, barely brutally a triumph that cost her everything but her pulse. Then, Reed paused, pulling a file from his coat, its edges singed from the safe-house fire. He handed it to her, his face grim, a shadow crossing his eyes. "One more thing," he said, voice tight. "The network's head, Senator Grayson, fled overseas an hour ago. Tate was his pawn." Tasha's good eye flared, her split lip curling into a dark grin as she flipped the file open. Grayson's photo, a white-haired titan in a suit, his private jet logged leaving Houston at midnight, a fortune shielding him from her storm. She clutched the file, her good hand steady, blood and soot streaking the pages as Reed watched silent. "Justice won today," she said, voice a rasp, "but the real fight's just begun." The van's door slammed, tires rolling as she stared at Grayson's face, a new target in her sights, her agent's fire rekindling. Pruitt, Holt, and Tate were down, their filth aired, but Grayson loomed, a hydra's head she'd hunt across oceans. She leaned back, the city blurring past, her scars a map of battles won and wars to come, her grin a promise. They'd never see her quit. Tasha Coleman's journey reveals profound truths about resilience, justice, and the fight against systemic corruption. Her story teaches us that strength isn't just surviving brutality, it's wielding it as fuel to expose evil. Tasha, a nurse-turned-undercover FBI agent, faced relentless racial violence from corrupt cops Pruitt and Holt, and their puppet master, Judge Tate. Each blow, arson, bombings, a lynching, tested her limits, yet she flipped their arrogance into a public reckoning, using hacked evidence and raw courage to dismantle their empire. The lesson? Persistence can crack even the toughest walls, but it comes at a cost. Family, safety, peace. Another takeaway is the power of truth as a weapon. Tasha's recorder and email leaks turned whispers into roars, proving that sunlight is the best disinfectant for corruption's rot. Yet her tale warns us justice isn't clean or final. Tate's network, tied to Senator Grayson, showed how deep racism and power intertwine, escaping her grasp even as she caged the foot soldiers. It's a call to vigilance. Victories are steps, not endings. Finally, her story underscores community's role. The mob that snared Pruitt and Holt was her voice amplified. Alone, she'd have fallen, but collective rage tipped the scales. What's your fight worth? Drop a comment with number 1 if Tasha's grit inspires you. Hit like if you're stunned by this racist story's twists, and subscribe to catch more battles for justice. Share if you stand against corruption. Thank you for joining Tasha's war, and here's to unyielding truth in your own struggles.